Okay, good morning, everybody. And I guess we'll get things going, and we'll give a couple more minutes, just let some people join before we lock the meeting. But first, just like thank everyone for joining today, and especially Mike from Pinchin. Before I do a quick bio of Mike, I think it's just a very timely conversation today, and just to talk about, with the government beginning to open up businesses now, how can we respond rapidly to all these changing conditions in a safe and quick way. So let me introduce Mike Chester from Pinchin. So Mike holds a Bachelor of Science in Environmental Science from Trent University. Mike is an accredited member of the Ontario Institute of Archaeologists and ECO Canada. Mike has a combined 20 years of consulting experience in the environmental and insurance industries and has assisted on over 500 projects coast to coast in Canada, including environmental site assessments, liability assessments, and risk management. The experience extends to insurance, industrial, commercial, and government projects. So I've known Mike for a while now, so I'm very excited to hear what he's got to say. So I'll shift it over to you, Mike.
Thanks so much, Adam. Yeah, thanks everybody for taking the time out to be on the webinar this morning. I'm really excited to be here, and I really appreciate the invite from the Clarington Board of Trade and the whole team there as well. It is timely. Things are shifting and changing rapidly, and I thought this is a really top of mind, obviously. And so we've created this sort of webinar topic based on how do you manage and minimize the risk of COVID-19 moving forward and getting back to work, getting back to some type of new norm, if you will. So what do we think this new norm might look like? And that's sort of the tricky part, is a lot of it is thinking out of the box and projecting and just trying to put our best management hats on in terms of how do we navigate this in a, within a cautionary type of approach. So yeah, I work for Pinchin. I've been with Pinchin for over a year now, but I've worked always in environmental work and due diligence. I'm part of their environmental due diligence remediation team out of the Oshawa office. Pinchin Limited is an environmental services engineering firm. So we've got about over 45 offices coast to coast in Canada with close to 1,000 employees. And we're multidisciplinary. So we do environmental due diligence for phase ones. We do occupational health and safety, hygiene work, environmental science work, like, ecological assessments, species at risk surveys. We do hazardous material investigations and things like that. But we're we have the office right at the Ritson Road, Bloor Street cutoff, and we got about 15 people staff there. And that's my contact information. If anybody wants to reach me, feel free to put it on the chat as well. Happy to talk anytime. So what is COVID-19? It's just to kind of go back to where we are at here. So it's a type of coronavirus. So it originated out of China, and it was designated as severe acute respiratory syndrome coronavirus 2, SARS stream, if you will. It's now been called COVID-19. So the coronaviruses are a group of related viruses that cause diseases in humans and other animals. And other examples of coronaviruses are SARS and MERS. And COVID-19 is a new disease that hasn't been previously identified in humans. So this is really going back to what I said. It's really uncharted territory for us and navigating it. And this is an older sort of graph, but it kind of looks at where is Canada on the COVID-19 trajectory. And I don't know whether you can see it with the to the right side or not, but are you able to see there is a circle with second wave question marks to the end of that? Obviously, this only takes us till April 6th, but we've recovered. We're heading in a really nice spot right now. There's some recovery. Number of affected people is lessening, and we're seeing a shift a little bit. But there is the idea of second waves. There is the idea of resurgences, and we have the idea of how our testing has been done in Ontario, and specifically, are the numbers, the statistics accurate enough? But I think the government, are treading very carefully, and we're seeing that over the course of the last few weeks. And we're looking at a phased approach of re-entering the economy. So different businesses are going to be able to open their doors under certain criteria, which is good, and to sort of navigate these new conditions moving forward. But I think the biggest takeaway from this is that it's uncertain. There's a lot of uncertainty to the end of this graph, whether it be today on May the 7th, it is not sure. It can resurge very quickly, and we've seen that before, right? We're at that extreme trajectory on May the 19th, so it sort of rapidly increased, and that can happen again quite quickly. So what do we know up to this point here, right? COVID-19 is transmitted via droplets during any close contact and unprotected contact. That's why we're seeing people now in grocery stores, with masks and gloves and washing their hands frequently. A single sneeze can produce up to 10,000 droplets. That's a massive amount. And single cough can produce up to 3,000 droplets. Viruses become airborne. They remain suspended in the air for a very long time, for a number of hours. So if the droplets, land on surfaces, the virus may survive for as long as 24 hours. And on sort of cellulose material like cardboard, it can last up to 3 days. So once it lands on surfaces, we're in a different area there. So there's no conclusive evidence at this point for any vertical transmission to date. Vertical meaning from mother to child, in utero. A zoonotic transmission through animals is possible, but currently there's not a lot of evidence to suggest that animals like, your pets at home are playing a significant role in spreading COVID-19. The virus has been detected in fecal and in the blood, but this role remains kind of uncertain again, and we're not sure. There's just limited data on COVID-19. Back to the uncertainties, the question marks. The virus has been detected on surfaces in infected environments where, contacts have been in. So that can lead to transmission through that route, through surface route. Now I wanted to talk about some of the pathways here. So the transmission pathways. So the transmission of COVID-19 is the most common. It's through direct contact and through these droplets that have the potential to be propelled. And you can see that, the slide previous to that, 10,000 droplets on a single sneeze. Person to person is the most common, and symptomatic means with symptoms. Asymptomatic is not without symptoms. There is a role that asymptomatic plays. It is being researched currently. We just don't know the degree that plays into it at this point. But the person to person is the most common, and that's with respiratory droplets making contact with the actual, membrane within your eyes, your nose, your mouth. So it's the mucous membranes. So sneezing and coughing within that 2 meter range. That's what we've been kind of going with, the 6 feet. So the average number of people that one person with a virus infects to the right side, you'll see, is dramatically more with the COVID-19. You'll see some ratios with the H1N1, and it's a much lesser degree. SARS, you got 2 to 4 there. And so once it infects people, it goes very quite rapidly. And it's when you don't have the symptoms, but you're infected already. That's again unknown territory of how long you could have it without feeling symptoms. So that's another concern, right? The other transmission pathway is the contact with contaminated surfaces. So COVID-19 can survive on surfaces, from several hours to days, and it depends on a number of sort of conditions. And one would be, the type of surface it's on. And to the right side, I put some references there of like within the air, it can last up to 3 hours, and within copper, 4 hours, and cellulose material like cardboard, up to 24 hours, and all on and on and on. Plastics, it stays on quite long, 3 days. And temperature it's restricted to certain temperatures and humidity levels as well. So that's an important criteria. And you only need a small amount of this COVID-19 to be infected. So we go back to that, that sneeze, 10,000 droplets. Well, that's a ton of droplets. And you only need a small amount to actually get infected and get into that membrane. So this is another kind of thing that's happened recently too, is traces of COVID-19 were recently discovered on a cruise ship, even 17 days after the passengers left the ship. So we're seeing it lingering around. And again, there's data gaps. We're not sure how this virus reacts to certain conditions. Now, how does it happen on these surfaces? And so the infected person sneezes or coughs, or simply is just chatting, right? You talk, and sometimes droplets are coming out of your mouth unbeknownst to you. And these droplets will land on either the person, right? Because you're close contact with them potentially. Hopefully you're not, and you're using, social distancing practices. But they're going to land on items. They're going to most probably commonly land on your laptop, your keyboard, your phone, things that are close at hand, a cup. It can land on a doorknob though, right? So if a person were to touch that doorknob or that contaminated object, they have the potential now have taken that hand that they've touched that item with, and you've got an itchy eye, or you're touching your nervous habit, touching your mouth, and now you're going to have a good, strong likelihood of getting infected with COVID-19 just because of that recontamination. So the technical name for these type of transmission is called fomite transmission, and that's the surfaces are called fomites. So a contaminated object or surface is a fomite. What are some of the challenges now as we enter back? We're now seeing there's the economy is getting back opened up. There's certain best practices that are going to need to take place, but this COVID-19 will likely be an issue for us all, top of mind. If 18 to 24 months we put down here, but we don't know, right? And until a vaccine has been developed, or maybe there'll be other streams of this occurring too. So we have to accept that there's certain risks as part of this new norm. The real estate industry is going to be probably impacted quite substantially, just because there's lots of industrial commercial sites with buildings housing a lot of people in them. And other businesses will need to get back to some type of normal fashion and limit this type of risk occurring. So Pinchin, what we do is we can help navigate our clients or people with these sort of issues and how to get back to work in a safe manner, because we have a whole occupational health and safety team and a hygiene team. And we've developed actually a team that's a COVID-19 team actually. So a lot of our experts are knowledgeable in the SARS end of things or other type of things we've had to navigate with. And so they have a fairly solid understanding of that piece. And now they're bringing the knowledge of the COVID-19 in and bringing those expertise forward. And so we've been working with a lot of larger clients as we speak on COVID-19, and I'm doing sort of building assessments and things like that, and how to navigate it. Here's another challenge, though. It's out of the box, right? So we talked about the challenge of basically, the simple exposure piece. But the other challenge, too, is a lot of people have left their buildings. These buildings have been sitting now, right? They've been at the little, low occupancy, no occupancy. Well, we have other problems potentially occurring, too. We could have mold buildup. We could have Legionella risk. We could have HVAC maintenance concerns, humidity issues. Humidity plays a fairly substantial role with COVID-19. So humidity is something you can sort of work with. And those are the things that we need to kind of look at out of the box to go, what are those undiagnosed problems, those unforeseen problems that you've left your building, now you're coming into it. What other things that you need to just sort of do a check mark on? And these are some of the things that we've come across that we just need to consider. So what is this new norm? What does it look like? I mean, I think we're all sitting here and working remotely, and we know the usual things we need to do, and that's with face masks and maybe gloves and lots of hand washing and hand sanitizing. But how do we get back to this new norm of some type of reoccupancy, right? Entering these buildings again or speaking to clients again. So there's health screening. There's a phased approach that we're seeing with the ministry now with reoccupying retail businesses and other businesses, healthcare facilities. There's going to be some creative distancing procedures maybe in place, protocols. We're seeing them already in grocery stores, right? With the dots to stand, the screens that are put up, plexiglass screens by the cashier, certain distancing pieces. And what about the aisleways in a lot of these grocery stores? Do they give enough time in the distance between the aisles? So the configuration of buildings, the way they've been planned and built, maybe has to be rethought too. So we've got a demographic analysis. We have a cleaning protocol now that we probably have never considered before, right? We have higher risk touch zones now. We have incident response. What are we going to do now? We've developed an occupational health and safety team. If you've cut your finger type of protocol that comes into place. Well, now what do we do if somebody, or a colleague or a client we find out later has COVID-19? How do we respond to that within the workplace? And there's training that needs to be provided to this. So Pinchin, what we've been working on in the last, 6 to 8 weeks is we've created a COVID-19 specialized service, a specialized team. This is just sort of a handout on the right side that we have an e-brochure, brochures that we give our clients and property managers and things like that. But the 4 key silos to take away on this is really that we offer incident response, a management plan for buildings, and we communicate this to the building owners, the occupants. And there's a training protocol in place too, so that everybody's on the same page. And that's the most important thing, right? It's how do you get, you can maybe control a bit of the flow of how your workers do, but sometimes you need the training for yourself too, the reminders for yourself, where, it's very easily to become forgettable, and you go back to doing what you always did. And then you go, oh geez, I remembered I shouldn't have done that, but you've already done it. So there's a training process that needs to be in place So there's a flow that's developed so that everybody is as best protected as possible. So the incident response cell, that first one of the four, so applies specifically to incidences in buildings where individuals with confirmed COVID-19 cases are present. So we review the individual site activities. What are the habits of the staff? Where do they go? Where's the lunchroom, and different sort of understanding how the whole process works. We develop a scope of work for cleaning, a cleaning protocol, because we often work with restoration contractors to sort of help with the client in order to not sort of say clean the whole thing. We potentially can hit certain areas that are more at risk, and so we're focusing our efforts in a smart way, and we're really hitting those zones that are higher risk surface areas. So, we work with the contractors and we help assist that and facilitate it with the client. We do visual verification on the site as well. We'll do actual screening of the COVID-19 testing and verify that the protocol has been followed. So the management plans in the buildings is just basically we're providing whose role is this going to be and whose responsibilities are this and how do the operations currently come in play. And then we customize those best practices to kind of meet the best that we can for what's happening right now. And of course, it's a moving target. So we provide, cleaning information and product recommendations. We look at the touching surfaces of the areas, the high touch zones. We then strategically create a plan to now focus our restoration cleaners on those higher touch surface areas. We look at the food prep areas, your lunchroom areas. That maybe has to change, right, and how that's done. And we look at outdoor services like gas pumps as well, because you're going to be touching that gas handle every time. How do we address that? I mean, you go from your gas handle to putting it back in the vehicle. You're touching your steering wheel. You're touching your shifter. So it's understanding that piece too. So the retail service counters are a big piece too. High traffic areas, and of course, I just spoke about the vehicles. You're entering and re-entering your vehicle how many times a day, constantly potentially bringing that COVID-19 into the vehicle. So the communication to building occupants is probably is a key, right, for all these sort of other pieces to come into play. Because if you don't have, people on board and a clear understanding of what the protocol is, it's useless in a binder, if you will. So communicating the risk to the tenants or anybody that's occupying, in the building is critical, and it's doing it at the right times. It's clear, it's concise, hopefully, and then you're getting the support of the management as well, pre and post incident communication. So there's always a clear chain of command right through the process. So there's very little confusion. And then there's a certain step process that, tenants, occupants are understanding as well. When they enter the building, this is what they need to do. And when they leave the building, this is what they need to do. So we conduct information seminars in regards to this for the management, but also for the tenants at risk and exposure and how to mitigate it and things that we believe that are important elements to facing the condition that their building is in. And then the training goes in hand with that, really. It's just about information about the COVID-19. It's sort of looking at, where are the gaps, what's new, what's emerging, what things do we need to then infill that training process. Maybe we did a step process training with COVID-19 because it's so new. You have to have multiple layers of it. There's a work procedure that's in place for training and building operators, the vendors, the tenants. There's a respirator fit testing, for the staff, for vendors that are involved to sort of work with this incident response. And then we're training those restoration cleaners and janitorial services as well, right? How to be proactive in the COVID-19 cleaning, using the right products, hitting the right high surface zones. That's why those management plans are really important, because it hones in on the plan of the building, where those restoration cleaners need to focus their surface cleaning, because we talked about that 20,000 droplets on one cough. And there's amount of projector, they can project that quite substantially. And it can go in a lot of high surface areas. So we help to organize the whole management process under this training silo. So it's as tight as we can, and everybody is as safe as possible. Oh, I wanted it to be pretty quick because I think the most important thing from it is not getting too deep in it, but I also think its awareness is really critical for this presentation. And just to let you know that we're here to support you. And that's probably the biggest takeaway. There's a fair bit of information there on it, but Valerie Johnston is our operations manager, and she's out of the Oshawa office, and she manages both the Oshawa and Peterborough office. And she's it is part of the COVID-19 team. And she's here to help you answer a question or to create a a management plan or a training process in place, or just a simple question going, geez, I don't know, what do I do here? Is it something that you guys can assist us with? We can certainly answer, she can answer that, quite quickly on it, or just, and go from there. But that's her email on the bottom there, as well as her office number. And she's still answering calls on that, plus the cell phone number as well. But I wanted, again, thank you for the time, and I am here for any questions as well, or just some thoughts.
All right, thanks, Mike. So again, just to everybody, if you have any questions or comments for Mike, just please feel free to put it into the chat. So Mike, I guess I'll get us started. I'll try not to give too many of the hard questions at the start. So the first one I have is, so, we're going to start to see a lot of businesses opening. And I know we were talking beforehand about, the government's kind of integrating that every 3 weeks there's going to be a new phase of what can open, who can open. So I guess my first question is kind of around what measures can these businesses take to make sure that things are safe for not only the customers, but also for the employees as they begin to open?
Yeah, I think we're going to get clear again, mandate on those phased out approaches, what the government are going to actually require you to do. But I think the obvious thing would be is having the masks available to your clients, as well as your staff, as well as hand sanitizer stations, and obviously with having gloves would be probably advisable as well. And I think from that end of things, that's what you can do to start with. But also I think really critical is to do kind of a building assessment. And that's kind of when I go back to that step process. To walk into the building right off the bat, I think it might be wise to just do a complete assessment of the building, make sure that it's in operational order, make sure there's, has anybody been in there since then? And then a good cleaning of the building would be smart by an actual contractor that's familiar with COVID-19, just to make sure, and then have something in place for cleaning moving forward, and maybe again going back into those high touch zones so that staff and clients and then the training piece will have to really come into it, because we're going to get a lot more information on what this will look like from the government as well. But having proper social distancing pieces in your office, still having certain flow occur. So those goes back to kind of what Pinchin can offer, what Val can offer, and that is provide some consulting advice on how their building is situated, what first steps would be good to do.
Okay, perfect. So I guess just to carry on with that, so let's talk maybe a retail store downtown Bowmanville. So with the touching component, a customer comes into the store, they're touching the clothes, they're touching the door handles, they're maybe touching something around the cash, what have you. So, another maybe tough question, but what can you do there? Because you can't necessarily just clean everything every time someone new comes into the store. So what kind of process or procedure, or how do you somehow mitigate that once they start to get open?
Yeah, it's a tricky slope in retail outlets, a lot of them as well. And I think comes down to the fact that there will be first of all, I think a number of capacity of people allowed in the retail store at one time. And then I think the other piece will come into it is the fact that you're going to have certain protocol in place to give you ample time as each visitor leaves, in order to then clean the areas that have been touched. And obviously you're not going to be able to know where they touched everywhere. But I think at the end of the day, you might have to have a cleaning plan and process that cleans a lot of the building itself, all those tight surf touch zones that have been identified. So they're done on a daily basis. And every time, that there's a client coming in, there's an entryway, I think they should be cleaned every time they exit as well.
Okay.
Handles, the debit machines, there should be a hand sanitizer. They're going to have, when they enter, use hand sanitizer. When they leave, they have to use hand sanitizer. So there's going to be some protocols like that in place, so that you're really trying to protect in multiple layers.
Yeah, and I guess even with the social distancing, once you start getting clusters of customers inside of a store, I know Home Depot is going to be open starting this weekend. How do you control that? So that'll be really interesting to see what that looks like. So maybe I'll shift over into the chat, Mike. So there's a question here. I think it's more government side, but do you see there being training mandatory for businesses?
Yeah, I don't think that it'll be mandatory.
Okay.
No, I just don't think it's the sheer volume of it. I don't think it will be mandatory, but I think there will be a tremendous amount of resources online for it and clearer directives. And I don't believe it will be, though, mandatory.
Okay. We have another question here. So it's, what would an elevator protocol look like in an office building, for example?
Yeah, they're going to have, hand sanitizer before entry and then leaving as well. And there's going to be daily cleaning on elevators because it's going to be a high surface area.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and limited number of, in terms of probably what they're probably thinking is about number of people on elevators. Yeah, one would think you have that distance protocol, right? How do you get more than, I don't know if you can even make a case for more than 4 people and one in each corner, but I don't know if they can control that. This is this thing. So I think it'll be a tricky slope. I think it will be a limited number of people in elevators, depending on the capacity of the elevator. It will be scaled down, and it wouldn't surprise me if it's down to 2 people in an elevator.
Yeah, and on that, I mean, I guess the question also becomes, how do you enforce it? Even with a lot of these businesses, I mean, we're making these recommendations, but someone doesn't comply or they don't know how to, who's going to enforce it?
The thing is, the big difference is that these will be guidelines versus regulations.
Mm-hmm.
So that's part of the why that's little can be enforced in mandatory training and things like that, because a lot of it's is guidelines. So it's not regulations in place. So that's why it'll be a lot of voluntary, a lot of awareness, a lot of educational piece, a lot of hopefully voluntary, approval of people believing in what they're hearing and doing what the right thing, like you say, social distancing and pieces like that. But it's policing it. It's just the sheer volume of it is just not possible. And so it's going to be doing what we're doing today. And that, I think, is just trying to be upfront and transparent, and be proactive, and take the information and be on a call like this. And yeah, I mean, even smooth surfaces are pretty high. Smooth surfaces are a big concern, like plastic or metal. They can live on those surfaces for quite substantially, even longer than paper or clothing. And then the other thing too is with indoor, they're not, they can last longer indoor because of the UV rays outside, right? The UV rays will kill the COVID-19 a lot more quicker than it would be indoors. So that's why the indoor is greater risk as well.
Perfect. All right, I'm going to shift back to the chat here. So we had a question. How would a reopening of an active senior center look like going forward? So I guess on that one too, I mean, I guess you have more of a vulnerable population, which I don't want to say complicates things more, but I guess there is a potential for a higher risk. Yeah,
they're going to probably, that's going to be, it's going to be very tricky. They're probably going to have zones in long-term care facilities in order to, in a phased approach, just because, like you say, they're high sensitive species. I mean, they're very vulnerable. And so I think there's going to be zones of not necessarily contact, but zones of visits. And obviously more like quarantining, the areas that are more high risk.
Okay. Next question here was, do you feel that masks are going to get to a point where they're mandatory? I mean, at least for as we integrate back, so CBOT, we all go back to the office. Do you see it being, highly recommended that all 6 of us have masks on anytime we're in the office?
Boy, it's really, I think it's tricky because it's the droplets, the respiratory is it's the number 1 cause of it, right? So I think, it could be. I mean, I think in the US, there are a lot of, like even Costco, you have to have a mask before entering that building, and not, Costco in Canada has not so far made that same mandate, but you would have to make a case for that, to be honest with you, that face mask should be worn at all times, at least until we have a handle on it, until we have a vaccine, because there's the second wave, it's the resurgence of this virus, and we're not out of the woods yet. This is the thing. There's some really good news coming, but we're treading very cautiously here.
Okay. So maybe just a kind of a nice quick sum up of what we were just kind of all talking about with the last few questions. Just something I have here. So thinking about maybe small SMEs, what are maybe just some do's and don'ts? Maybe what are 3 do's, going into all of this and reopening, and what are 3 don'ts? to kind of consider and really make sure that you're not doing as we begin to reopen?
Yeah, they kind of go, kind of hand in hand, don't they, a little bit? But yeah, the do is really, I think, is we have to, I think, out of the box thinking, we have to, the do part is we need to be cognizant of our actions. And that is where, I think oftentimes we don't want to do things because of the appearance or what have you, but we have to realize that we're protecting other people. And so that comes hand in hand of kind of the do's, I think, and that's the do is you need to wear a face mask. And that's number one. It's so critical with the number of droplets that can come out, even a simple sneeze or a cough or just any type of verbal exchange. So I think the do is I think you need to wear probably a face mask and lots of hand washing. Soap is number one. Well, lots and lots of hand washing, and I think that the other do is just I'm always kind of out of the box a bit, but I think we just have to be open-minded. I think we can't be closed-minded in this whole situation, and that is the whole way of working is different, is going to change, and working remotely. And so just having an open mind, try to be an open-minded person. That's kind of a do I like. And I think the don'ts kind of go hand in hand with that. And I think, realize the don't, and that is, I think you need to hand wash. I think you got to be cognizant of other people. If it was we look at it and sort of flip it around sometimes and go, if that was my significant other, would I really? Well, of course you would. So you have to think of it that way. And I think that, the other don't is we need to not be close proximity to people that we don't live in the same residence still. Be very, very careful with that. And we also know that the number of the non-symptomatic. So when you don't have the symptoms, you can still be infected, right? So you can't lose sight of that. And it can be a lot of days that you're not feeling symptoms, but could be infected. And then there's a varying range of how will you ever feel infected. There's some people that don't, right? So you are always maybe at risking other people and especially those vulnerable people. But we also know with this virus that it can hit people that are quite healthy too. So we have to be careful not to be, I think, that's okay because we're young and we're healthy, that kind of approach. And it's not the case. And yes, it is that most vulnerable are hit the hardest. Yes, it appears that way, but it doesn't mean to say that a healthy, 6-year-old or 20-year-old won't be potentially severely in ICU or what have you. So I think that's just the whole thing in the bundle there. I think we just have to be open-minded, use best practices. We keep our face masks on, lots of hand washing, and just try to stay positive. We have a new norm coming.
Perfect. So just a reminder, if anyone has any other questions, just to please put them in the chat. So my kind of last big one here, Mike, is I kind of usually ask this to everybody, but I think you touched on it quite a bit during the conversation, but maybe again, just to kind of narrow it down, is what do you think the biggest change out of all of this is going to be? And I know we've spoken about handshakes. We've had conversations about, a lot of people will now be maybe shifting a lot more towards social media or e-commerce. So in your opinion or in your perspective of work, what's kind of the big thing you're going to see that's going to change, once we're, say, 2 years from now, based on what's happening right now?
Well, yeah, I just think it's the way we conduct business now, which is going to be the biggest change, I think. And I think that's the fact that we're, maybe potentially not able, the herd philosophy of being with larger groups and that kind of thing. So I think that landscape is changing, has changed already. And I think we'll be using things that we're doing right now and Zoom calls and touch points that are maybe more virtual. And then also a certain protocol in place. We minimize contact with other people as well will be kind of top of mind. Where before we really took it as, we're just going to drop in with a coffee or do simple things, right? Now I think there's a lot of, there is a lot of thought moving forward. And we go to sites, there's questionnaires provided to clients before we get there. So they're aware we're coming. We're trying to minimize as much information that needs to be, provided from the client to us. We get it all beforehand. So when we go to the site, it's kind of a no contact zone. So that's changed, and that will change moving forward.
Perfect. There was just a comment. So just I guess to clarify, so Valerie would be the COVID contact for anybody looking to reach out?
Yeah, myself, Valerie is the project manager out of the Oshawa Pinchin office moving forward. She will be leading all those projects, but certainly, feel free to send me a message and I can facilitate the contact as well, or answer any questions or get things moving along quickly as well.
Perfect. And I think maybe we just have one question left here. So we spoke kind of about a potential for a second wave. So, I mean, it's hard to say when's that going to happen, but maybe your thoughts on that. And then how can we prepare based on what we've learned from the first time around?
Well, they say the second wave is maybe projected. Again, it's not, who knows, but it might be in the fall time just because of the conditions and temperature conditions. And so, saying September, October, potentially. And how do we better prepare? And I think it's kind of doing what we're doing right now, and that is talking about it, realizing that this, while it is selective to vulnerable people, the older, we are, but it's not some elements too. And so there's other strains that can come out of this. We've seen SARS, different coronavirus, COVID-19 now. We know the whole term of superbugs, super viruses, right? So they're smart, right? So this is why I think the takeaway is that we need to change the way we do things and be open-minded to it. And we need to not just enter our buildings willy-nilly, if you will, and just, and I don't think we're going to do that. I think we're a lot smarter, and I think we're going to make sure that we have, hand sanitizer in place. We're going to have a protocol in place for not only our staff, protecting the clients, and then also that flow has changed. Maybe we're not coming to work every day. Maybe we're coming into work minimally. There was that whole virtual working before, working remotely, however you want to look at it, telecommunicating, that makes a sense in some elements when you think about it, about, the climate change piece and how we can maybe support lessening GHG emissions. And maybe this is an interesting way to look at it and going, well, what, this might help a lot of other things as well by thinking differently.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's an interesting point. One thing I've heard is that the environment or climate change has kind of been, at its lowest since this, just based on the lack of people driving across the world and, pollution and water. And so it's been interesting.
There's been a 5% drop in GHG emissions since this outbreak. Mm-hmm. So yeah, real positive news, right? So yeah, what we can maybe take something from this that will be a positive shift. And so I think that's the way to look at it, is that be open-minded, be positive, and we can all make a difference. That's number one. And just by thinking differently and being a little more proactive and using these best practices pieces here as well. And again, we're here for you. And if you just have a question, feel free to send me a message, and I jump on them quite quickly. And we really want to support our community. So glad to be there.
Perfect. So maybe as I wrap things up here, Mike, if you maybe want to just throw your email, your number in the chat, just so that way if anyone wants to get a hold of you. I see Valerie's is on the screen there. So with that being said, thanks, Mike, for everything today. I think you gave a great perspective and a lot of things to think about as we begin to reopen. And whether you're a small business, you're retail, you're in the sciences, you're in office, you're in construction, there's just a lot to think about. So I think that we'll all get through this, and I think that as long as we, consider what's happened and, try not to get there again and take precautions, I think all will be well. So with that being said, thanks, Mike. It's been a pleasure. And just wanted to remind everybody that if you are interested in any other webinars that CBOT is doing, you can check out cbot.ca, and we've got everything there. So thanks, Mike. I appreciate it.
Thanks so much for everybody. Thanks, everybody. Be safe. That's true. Good.
Okay. All right. Great job, Mike.
Thanks so much. I'm just trying to stop the screen share. I don't know how to.
Yeah, here. Okay. Take care.
Take care. Stay safe.